So we're about to turn to Lamed Daled Amud Beis, but first, Chad Omar on the bottom of Lamed Daled Amud Aleph, L'divrei Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda's Shita, that the pillar climbed 12 mil, Mishum Sha'oches Sheksha'avru Yisrael B'Yarden, Ke Seder Chaniyosem Avru. In other words, Kol Machne Yisrael B'Chaniyoso was 12 mil. Therefore, when they crossed the Yarden, the time it took them to cross the Yarden was the time that it took for this 12 mil, which is reflected in the height of the pillar. So they crossed the Jordan in the same formation as their encampment. So Rabbi Yehuda arrives at the figure of 12 mil based on the premise that the length of the procession crossing the Yarden was 12 mil. And we know that the Machne Yisrael, where they camped, was a formulation that extended over an area of 12 mil, by 12 mil. So the length of the procession crossing the Yarden was also 12 mil. It emerges that the time between the entry of the first people into the Yarden and the departure of the last people is no less than the time it takes for the procession to travel 12 mil. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda calculates that the column of the water was also advanced 12 mil in that time, and he assumes that the water moved upwards at the same speed as the people. L'divrei Rabbi Elazar, Reb Shimon, right, and he says that the water rose up 300 mil. They crossed the Yarden one at a time. Eina kavoda she'avru b'zecher ze mamish im keinenu toli klal b'kitzva el shmizeh shenoktu 300 mil nir she'avru b'rochav 50 mil. So he has a long calculation here, which we're not going to go into now. He says crossing in single file, one person after the other, would take a considerable length of time. This would justify Rav Shimon's opinion that the water reached a height of more than 300 mil in that period. If they crossed the Jordan in the formulation of their encampment, which measured 12 mil by 12 mil, the water would not have risen to such a great height. Why did Rav Shimon himself attribute the height of the water to the fact that the water travels faster than man? This explanation holds that the height of the water was based not on its speed, but on the length of time taken by the crossing. But Reb Shimon disagrees with Rabbi Yehuda on 2 points. First, he argues that even according to Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, that Bnei Yisrael crossed the Yarden in the formation of their encampment, nevertheless, the column of water had to be more than 12 mil high because the water flows faster than the people would walk. Secondly, the truth is that they crossed the Yarden in single file as the water rose to a tremendous height of over 300 mil. B'chanomer, according to another opinion, Bein Mar u'Bein Mar, both Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon agree shebechaniyosan avru, that they passed through the Yarden in the formation of Machne Yisrael in the Midbar. But what is the machlokas? Mar savar adam kal. Man moves faster, or at least at the same speed as water. Mar savar mayim kalim, and the water travels faster. So according to Rabbi Yehuda, man is as swift as water, and therefore the time taken by the people to travel 12 mil, the water did not travel further. Whereas according to Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, the water is much swifter than man. Hence, although the procession of the people was only 12 mil long, according to this particular opinion, the water reached a height of more than 300 mil. All right, now that we spoke about the masa of the eshkol, the carrying of the cluster of grapes, now we get into the parasha of Meraglim. Hashem says to Moshe, Bamidbar Yud Gimel, Parsha Shlach, Shlach lecha anoshim. Omer Shlakish, Shlach lecha midaitcha. I don't have any will and desire, says the Kadosh Baruch Hu, that they should send spies. But if you have the opinion, Moshe, that since Bnei Yisrael were pressing for it, they were asking for Meraglim, then midatcha, you decide on your own. By your own discretion, but not by my command. And that's the meaning of the word lecha. God indicated that he was not commanding Moshe to send spies, but since Israel was demanding that Moshe do so, he would not stand in Moshe's ways. The choice was left to Moshe. When Moshe spoke to Hashem regarding the request of Klal Yisrael, Hashem was actually angered, and he told Israel that it was a goodly land. He had already told them, so his word should have been sufficient. And Israel's demand demonstrated that they did not trust God, but wished to judge the land on their own and choose for themselves. God responded by making the choice a real one. God knew that the spies might succumb to the temptation, the pressure to speak ill of the land. And should Israel accept that slander, they would forfeit the land. And yet God left Israel room to err. The Gemara now proves that the Ratzon Hashem was opposed to the shlichus of the Meraglim. If the Adam zeh borach chelek chali atzmo, is a derech Adam to choose for himself something that he knows would end up against, his better interest, to say the least, l'ra'ah. And here also, would Hashem send spies when he knows that at the end of the day there'll be a takala? So therefore, we must assume that this was not the Ratzon Hashem. Hainu d'chsiv, and that's what it says when Moshe tells Bnei Yisrael regarding their request to send Meraglim at the beginning of Sefer Dvarim, Vatikravun elai kulchem, vatomru nishlacha anoshim l'faneinu v'yachbru lanu es haaretz. V'yashivu osanu davar es haderech asher nale bo v'es haorem asher novo aleim v'yita b'einai hadavar. Amrei Shlakish, what is Moshe Rabbeinu emphasizing? It found favor in my eyes, is b'einai v'lo b'einav shel makom, but not in the eyes of Hashem. Hashem was not happy about this at all. And he quotes the Ramban here. If it found favor in the eyes of Moshe, why does Moshe give them such a rebuke when it found favor in his eyes? He says, according to the Ramban, that Moshe understood that the mission of the Meraglim was to check the land and see how they would conquer the land. It wasn't to check the land to see whether it's a good land or a bad land. That was the decision of the Meraglim. The pasuk says, "V'yachberu lanu es haaretz," and the Gemara darshans the word "v'yachberu." Omer Abchia bar Abba, Meraglim lo niskavnu ela boshta shel Eretz Yisrael. So we're interpreting the word "v'yachberu" as boshes. They wanted to find the gnus, the negative, derogatory elements of Eretz Yisrael. That was their intention. So when they asked to send Meraglim, the Yachbru, Ksiv Hacha, here it says, V'yachbru lanu es ha'aretz. So Ksiv Hasam, in the 24th chapter of Yeshaya, it says, V'chafra alavana ubosha achama ki malach Hashem tzvakos bar Tzion b'Yushalayim, the neged's kain of kavod, which means that those who serve, those who worship the sun and the moon will be humiliated, would be embarrassed. And that's the interpretation of the word chafra. And he quotes here, the Targum says, Yisbaishu. So the Ovdei Chamal Levani Yisbaishu Liyosid Lavo. So the Gemara derives from this, the Chafira is Busha. And therefore the Pasuk intends to tell us that they wanted to be Mavayish, the land of Israel, to see its Busha, its Gnus. Now, in the Parsha of Meraglim, it says, V'yelish Shmosam Lamate Ruven Shavua Ben Zakar, etc., etc. And the Torah enumerates the names of the people that were sent by Moshe. Omer Rabbi Yitzchak and Davar Zeh, Misoros B'Yadenim Avosei Shem Meraglim Al Shem Maseim Niku. The names are indicative of their meisim. However, we don't know exactly how these names, what they mean. We only know one name out of the entire list, and that's Sisur ben Michael. Sisur Ushasosar Maisov Shalakodesh Baruch. By being Motzi Laz, derogatory words about Eretz Yisrael, it's like being Makrish HaKadosh Baruch Hu, because Hashem said that the land is Eretz Zovas Cholav Udvash, and the father of Sasur was Michael. We're going to darshan Michael Sha'osa Atzmo Mach. Mach means weak, and El means Hashem. So he made Hashem weak. In other words, by saying that we don't have the ability to conquer the Goyim that are occupying the land of Israel, the implication is God is weak. We have another one in the Meraglim whose names we interpret, Nachbi ben Vavsi. And what is Nachbi? V'loshen shehichbi, to hide. Shehichbi dvarav shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In other words, even though he saw the beauty of the land, as Hashem had promised, that it's a good land, and it flows milk and honey. Nevertheless, Hichbi, he hid, he concealed the Amitas Hadvarim. He concealed the truth that he was Motzi Laz ala Oretz. And the name of his father was Vavsi. Vavsi Shepisea. He jumped over Al Midosa Shal Kadosh Baruch Hu. Shalo Omar Osam Kefi Shehem Be'emes Ragina Es Ha'oretz. The Meraglim, it says Vayalu by Negev, Vayovo. What's Vayovo in the singular? Ad Chevron. And the answer is only one of the Meraglim came to Chevron. Vayovo Omerava Malamed Sheperesh Kolev Metzas HaMeraglim. Peresh means he separated himself from the Meraglim. He realized that they were evil. And Holach, he himself, Levado, went to Chevron and Ishtatach al Kivrei Avos, and he prostrated himself on the Kvarim of our Avos. Yom Alehem Avosai Bakshu Olai Rachamim Shen Notzel Me'atzas Meraglim. And we'll see in a second why Yoshua didn't have to pray, but Kalev felt that he would be influenced by the Meraglim. I mean, we learned a number of things here. You see the impact on a great tzaddik like Kalev of the society that he associates with. You also see the power of prayer, that even though Hakol B'dei Shemayim Chutz Mi'Yirah Shemayim, and certainly if others are praying on your behalf, but nevertheless, the prayers are meaningful to set the atmosphere and the conditions so that he wouldn't be influenced by the Yetzer to go the wrong way. And that's based on a principle called Habol L'Sayeh Misayim Lo. Min HaShamayim, they will help him. Now, Tosas asks, based on a Gemara that holds in Brachos that Eina Mesim Yodim Me'uma, that the Mesim don't know what's going on in this world. And even the Avos Olam don't know. So how could the Kalev be Mispalet? How would they know? And he says that Al Yidei Shekach Ispal Hodia LaAvos Mitfila Zu. through his tefillos, they notified the avos about this tefillah, and they were mevakesh olav rachamim. However, Yoshua, Barbikesh Moshe olav rachamim, he didn't need to go to Hebron to be mispal at the Kivrei Avos. And again, we learn from here how important it is to be mispal Kivrei Avos. Shenemar vayikra Moshe loShea ben Nun Yoshua Yoshiacha me'atzas Merag. Hainu dichsiv the Avdi Kolev Ekev Hoysa Ruach Acheres Imo Vayamali Acharai Vevi Osiv El Ha'artz Asher Bashoma V'Zar Yoshena. Since Kolev went by himself to Hebron, he received a chelek in Eretz Yisrael that included Hebron. As the pasuk says in Yoshua, Vayitenes Hebron leKolev ben Yefuna leNachla. Now the next part of the pasuk, Vayalu Banegev Vayavo ad Hebron, V'sham Achimon Sheishe V'salmei Yelidei Ha'anak. The Hebron Sheva Shonim Nivnesa Lifnei Soin Mitzrayim. And there in Hebron dwelt Achiman, Sheshai, and Talmai, the offspring of the giant. So since we're already interpreting names, because the name is reflective of the essence of a person, and we're saying about the Meraglim that their evil was somehow essential to their very selves, then we're now going to darshan the names of Achimon. Achimon miyuman shebecha. Achimon means he was miyuman. He was the most important of his brothers. And that's based on taking the word miyuman, taking the word Achiman, and splitting it in two. So there's a combination of Ach and Yemin, a brother, and the right hand. The right hand is more important and stronger than the left hand. Achimon was the most important of the three brothers. He was the mightiest of the three. Sheshai shemesim es haaretz ke shchasos. He says here that boros, that shchasos, like shichin and ma'oros, are boros, miloshin be'er shachas. So he was so gigantic that when he stepped on the ground, he made, pits in the ground. And the third was Talmai, shemesim es haaretz tlomim, that when he went on the karka, his weight was such that he made furrows in the ground. She'afar ola kitlulis misviv lipsiosa, kmo atlamim shemrachreisha osa shemalas ha'afar soviv l'telen. Davar achar Achimon bana anos, Sheshai bana olush, and Talmai bana talmush. These were the cities that were built and constructed by these three giants. Yelidei ha'anok, the pasuk says Yelidei ha'anok, shema'anikim chama biko masa. Anok is a necklace. Misviv l'tzavareim. His weight and strength was such that his feet broke the ground like a plowshare, raising the earth and biting deep into the ground. He says here the Torah doesn't usually mention these giants when citing the name Hebron, but it mentions it here because it was the fear of the giants that caused the other spies to avoid Hebron. It is thus size and strength that cause mention, the reason for the mention of these giants, so the Gemara expounds their names. They were so tall that their heads seemed to penetrate the window of the heavens, making it seem as though the sun hung from their necks like a necklace. A nak is a necklace. Bechevron Shemesh Shanim Nivnasa. It was 7 years before Tzoan of Mitzrayim was that Hebron was built. My Nivnasa Ilim Nivnasa Mamish. If it's taken literally as built, that can't be because Efshar Odom Bona Bayis Libno Katan Kodem Libno Gadol. Yichsibu Bnei Cham Kush Mitzrayim. So Cush was older than Mitzrayim. And Canaan is the second of Cham's sons, was older than Canaan, the fourth. So it's unlikely that Cham would build Hebron for Canaan before he would build Tzoan for Mitzrayim. So we cannot interpret the word built literally. Al hoisa mevuna al echad mishiva v'tzoan. So nivnasa means fertility. That Hebron was 7 times more fertile than Tzoan. So the Gemara asks the following kasha: Ve'en lecha trashim b'chol eretz Yisrael yasser michevron. We know that there's no stony ground more in the land of Israel more stony than Hebron. Mishum dekirei Shchive, evident from the fact that they buried the dead there. And amongst the lands, you don't have a land that's better than Mitzrayim. Shenemar, Kigan Hashem Keretz Mitzrayim, like the garden of Hashem, like the land of Mitzrayim. And you don't have in all of Mitzrayim anything better than the land of Tzoan. Ki hoyu b'tzoan sarav, the officers were in Tzoan. So the officers of the king went to Tzoan to seek out the king of Egypt. So it means that the king of Egypt obviously chose the most choice land. If this served as the royal seat, is evidently the finest land in all Mitzrayim. Nevertheless, Hebron mevuna echad mishiva b'tzoan. Hebron was 7 times more fertile than Tzoan. So the Gemara asks, the Hebron Troshim Havi. The ground of Hebron was stony. That's not the fertile land. V'ksiv v'himi keitz arboim shana v'yomer Avshalom el-melech Elchana v'shalem es nidri asher nadarti lo b'Chevron. He took a neder that b'shivti b'gshur ba'aram lemor im yoshev yishveni Hashem Yushalayim v'avadites Hashem ve'olim melech leif b'shalom ve'yokom ve'elech Chevron. So why did Avshalom go to Chevron? There was no Mizbeach in Chevron. It was only in Givon. Omer Rabbi Avya v'itema Rabba Baruch Hanan shaholach Avshalom went lahavi kvasim mi-Chevron. Apparently there was grazing land in Chevron, and the sheep were very good quality, and that's where he went to Hebron. Tanya, we learned in the Brisa regarding the best places for taking karbanos for the Mizbeach, Elim mimov kvasim michevron. So it seems like sheep, the best sheep were in Hebron. That was the Makom Mireh. So how do we understand if Hebron was a stony land? The more answers me no. From the base of your kasha, I will give you the answer. That Hebron was a stony land, but I did the Klisha Ara, since the offer of Troshim Muat, Koloshu, the Ein Roi Lizriya, so the land is not good for planting. And they didn't plant there. And therefore, of the Raya, it was Mala Sovim Atov Lemira, the Shamen Kinyana. By Yedei Mashmin Atson, Shu Kinyano Shal Adam, and Imsa Shemakom Shal Admas Troshim, B'Makom Sheyesh, Sham Yesh Yosef Mira, Mesha Makom Sodos. And therefore, Avshalom went there to get the Kvasim. He went to bring lambs from Hebron for his offering. The finest sheep were raised in Hebron. And it was taught in a Brisa that rams from Moab and lambs from Hebron, there's good pasture land in Hebron. Yet we said that the ground is stony. Mina, from your very question, I can prove that the ground in Hebron is stony. I did the Klisha Ara, but since the soil there was poor, it produces good pasture. And the flocks graze and grow fat. The stony soil is generally thin and poor and seldom used for crops, for planting crops. And since it's not cultivated, it sprouts grasses which provide good pasture for sheep. Thus, the sheep grow fat because of the poor soil. Indeed, it is the way of sheep to prosper more in stony, dry land than in rich, moist land. Vayashuvu mitur haaretz. They returned from spying the land at the end of 40 days. And here on the top of Lamed Ches, Vayelchu Vayavo. Rav Yochanan Mishum Rav Shimon Bar Yochai Makish Halicha Lebia Mabia Beitza Ra Af Halicha Beitza Ra. Okay, so this is where we'll stop for today.